What's up, everybody? Welcome to Heresy Financial. My name is Joe Brown, and today I've got my good friend Aleks. He is the CEO of Amber App, and so I've got him on the channel today. We are going to have a blast, good conversation about Bitcoin, the decentralized solutions to centralized problems, and how there is a better solution even than that. So we're going to get into it. Aleks, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, brother. I feel good. I'm usually the only one with no hair on these podcasts, so now there's two of us.
Absolutely. Well, great. I wanted to cover really briefly. I want to hear about your background because right now you're running Amber, which, by the way, it's a great app. I use it. It's the first, or maybe it's the only Bitcoin only app. Is that correct?
No, there's lots now. Like we were kind of the first Bitcoin only DCA app. So like we kind of built the entire business around this idea of, hey, forget about trading, forget about like trying to outsmart the market, forget about all that sort of stuff. Just shut the fuck up and buy some Bitcoin on a regular basis. And hey, guess what? We'll make it even easier for you. You can tell the app to do it for you automatically, and you go about doing something productive in your life other than staring at charts and trying to outsmart the the millions of traders out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, my favorite feature, I don't know if this is new, I just saw it though a couple of days ago, was where it will buy Bitcoin every time Peter Schiff tweets about Bitcoin. So I just love it. It's really fun that you have stuff like that, and it's a great app. I've got it linked below for anybody who wants to use it, try it out. What got you to this point? What's your background, and what got you to the point of saying, hey, the world needs Amber?
Yeah, well, I mean, I would say even more importantly than that, the world needs Bitcoin. And I would say that Amber is just my entrepreneurial expression of that pursuit. Then I do a lot of writing, I do a lot of speaking, I do a lot of podcasting. And for me, all of these are just different modalities towards that outcome, which is the world needs Bitcoin. We need to take the mechanism via which we measure time, energy, resources, and subjective productive input in society. We need to take that and we need to place it outside of all of our hands. So long as it's in someone's hands, so long as there is an issuer to this technology called money, we are fucked. We're always playing an unfair game. We're playing a game of Monopoly where one player has their hand on the till and they're just pulling out money while the rest of us have to play by the rules. And then it skews the entire incentive of the game, where instead of playing to be a good player, you play to become friends with the person who's got their finger on the money. And then the whole thing changes. And that's the deranged sort of world we're living in today. So, Bitcoin fixes that, and Amber's just the one vehicle for that for me. But to answer your, the question underneath the question, which is my background. So I guess my story generally starts with me in 2007, 2008, basically experiencing and living the GFC from Australia as a engineering student at university who took his scholarship money, placed it on the market in 2007, made a bunch of money trading options, long, short, up and down, around in circles. I think I 20x'd my stack. And then I managed to blow up the entire stack. And by the time I turned 20, basically be $250,000 in debt. And that's $250,000 in 2007 money. I don't know how much that's worth now. But, that experience then took me down multiple rabbit holes. And one being entrepreneurship, like I had to dig myself out of the hole with my own two hands. And the other just kind of learning about why is this whole system so retarded? Like, what the fuck actually happened? And in doing so, like I landed early on to people like Peter Schiff and Max Kaiser and Doug Casey and all these guys, like the early gold bugs in 2010, 2011. And I became a total gold bug, and I made a bunch of money out of that. And unlucky for me though, I then continued messing around with trading and this and that. And I was like one of those perma bears, you know, like since, you know, between 2008 and 2020, you know, like whether it was Hugh Hendry, who was brilliant, you know, Kyle Bass and all these guys who were always like basically perma bears. They thought none of this makes sense. It's all going to fucking blow up, but it never blew up because just printing, you know, bailouts after bailout after bailout, the complete socialization of society. And anyway, I guess my story over that time kind of went from messing around with markets into just building different businesses. And I was across multiple different industries. Like I was in the renewable energy space for a while. I was in hospitality. I was in tech. And primarily over the last 4 years, I built this business called Amber, which I guess my raison d'etre was I was running around in 2016, 2017, telling everyone to buy some Bitcoin. And I would basically get one of a series of questions like, what the fuck is it? How much should I buy? When should I buy? Why should I buy it? Like, and I was like, look, it is, you know, it's the best money and this and that. Like you go like nuts, you know, about that. And then once they're convinced, they're like, okay, so where do I buy it? And you're like, yo, well, there's this exchange, you need to do this, you need to do that. And people like look at me like, well, what do you mean? I just want to buy some. So I was like, man, there must be a product that I can build around this. So I kind of took my entrepreneurial flair and put together a team, etc. And, you know, we had a rough start. Like we started basically in 2018 during the bear market. And in the first half of 2018, I got laughed at for not doing a token. Because everyone was raising millions of dollars through ICOs. And I was like, this is like insanity. I said, I'm not going to issue a phantom token over a promise of economy. Effectively, that's what a token is, and do it in a way that's non-dilutive. I said, I'm trying to sell you a piece of the company, and people are like, no, we want a token. I was like, you're fucking kidding me. And then when that all collapsed, then it was the bear market, obviously, and then people were laughing at me like, hey mate, didn't you read the news? Bitcoin's dead. Like, what are you doing running a Bitcoin company? And you know, I just sort of kept at it. You know, we managed to survive 2019, and 2020 we built a foundation. Now 2021's been a strong year for us. So it's kind of the progression. And you know, my background, like as all of this progressed, and as particularly the insanity of the last 2 years has progressed, you know, it's really reinforced for me and for many others, like why it is so fucking important to have a money that is immune to any bureaucrat, any institution, any organization, any group of any kind to be able to mess with, because should they have that capacity, they can perpetuate an economic fraud, which is effectively what we're seeing in the world today on every dimension, whether public policy, whether, you know, reactions to supposed viruses, whether lockdowns, whether woke stuff, whether censorship, whether anything. It is all, the root cause of all of it is the fact that someone can change the scorecard and make it seem like what's happening is not happening, when in reality, everything's being eroded. So anyway, that's like an intro.
And a lot of people would say that it's not necessarily the ability that, let's say, the Federal Reserve has to manipulate or control the price of money, the cost of money, the supply of money. It's the fact that they do. And I think the one of the biggest pillars of Bitcoin is that you don't even have to deal with that question then, because you don't have anybody who has that ability. So you don't have to rely upon, you know, the integrity of somebody with almost omnipotent power when considering the economy in their hands.
Absolutely. I mean, if we just stop for a moment and just think about like, what is it that this tool called money does? Like, why did it emerge? And my argument is that it emerges for any cognitively advanced sentient species, right? Whether it's humans or whether it's some other fucking alien somewhere else, in order for them, those constituents of a society, or for any individual to cooperate amongst each other, there needs to be a way to encode value amongst each other, such that the trade can happen and the storage of the product of one's labor can occur. And that technology is money. Like money has existed from the beginning of time and it'll exist until the end of time. The only thing that has changed has been the modality or the good that we've used as money. We started off as promises. The first cave inscriptions that we found were effectively ledgers of people measuring who did what, right? And that's what we need. And we just kind of went from there to rocks, to seashells, to fucking probably dog shit at some stage, to God knows what else, like salt, this, that. And we kind of looked for better objects or better things to represent this metaphysical idea of money. And we all naturally converged onto gold, for example, because gold just has superior properties for its use as money. Like gold is the only metal that is a solid at room temperature that is chemically inert. You don't have that anywhere else. So as a result, arguably humans, or if there's aliens out there as well, we would all converge onto gold as the mechanism for storing and transacting the product of our labor. That is a natural progression. And then we would also all progress to this thing called fiat money, because gold, just as the productive capacity of society increases, gold must become more and more divisible to service the problem, to solve the problem of intersubjective value, to solve the problem of the coincidence of wants. But because gold is a physical object, it is not infinitely divisible. And as such, we need to, we had to issue paper against it, but then some genius decided to just issue more paper than there was gold. And we know the sort of the story subsequent to that. And then, here we are just pressing buttons on a fucking screen somewhere and creating money out of thin air, which has no relationship back to the productive capacity of society. So it distorts everything.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really glad you brought up the issue of divisibility because, let me see if I have it real quick. One sec.
Shoot.
Okay, so right here, I don't know if you can see it. This is called a gold back, and this is a piece of laminated gold. It's two pieces of plastic with gold in between. And this right here is about, I think it's $1.50 worth of gold. This took the company 20 years to develop and then patent the process to get this small enough amount of gold. And this is like by technological advancements, 20 years. This is the smallest amount of gold that you can transact with if you wanted to use this. But $1.50 is still more than some things cost, right? And so when you get to the point of civilization where you've advanced so much and there's so much wealth, you need the medium of exchange. You really, for long-term purposes, you need it to be infinitely divisible, not just partly. And so that's something that a lot of people say that Bitcoin can't scale because how are you gonna send one Bitcoin, or even one sat at some point might become too valuable. But Bitcoin doesn't have that problem, right?
Well, it doesn't, because at the end of the day, what we need to think about, first of all, is the point at which one sat, represents probably the equivalent purchasing power of 1 cent today. I mean, you're talking what? That's $100 million Bitcoin, isn't it? Or
yeah, I believe so.
Or it's $1 million Bitcoin. Sorry, I think it's $1 million Bitcoin. 1 cent to 1 sat. Yeah. So we're already in a different world at that point. Like, that is a fundamental change in the fabric of the economy that we live in, right? But beyond that, as the purchasing power of 1 sat increases beyond that, we're going to be interacting with and using products that are on subsequent layers on the Bitcoin tech stack, like Lightning being one evident layer. There'll be subsequent ones. And the products and the tools and the services you'll use on that will most likely give you mini sats, microsats, nanosats, and further down, in order to enable the further fractionalization of Bitcoin, still within the scope of a fixed amount of total Bitcoin. So the problem isn't like you've got the fiat system on one side where 1 cent is the smallest denomination, but then it's infinitely divisible. Infinitely inflatable upwards. Whereas Bitcoin is like, here's the fixed point, and now just go and create microsats, mini sats, nanosats, whatever the petasats, or whatever the fuck the next denomination is, but you can do that with something that is digital because there's no cost to doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. So it doesn't even require like a majority vote, big monetary change or a hard fork. It's just, you're talking about second and third layer applications that solve that issue.
Totally.
That's
Like,
great.
and that they will all chain onto each other, and not to conflate that with blockchain, but that is like, they will be related to each other. So for example, there's a company called Impervious at the moment that's building third layer stuff using Lightning as the routing protocol, and they're creating like uncensorable messaging, where, you know, on the Lightning network, basically code or data gets split up and it is sent via Lightning channel routes, and then it gets recombined on the other end, and it is a voice message that can't be censored because it's being routed on the Lightning network, not on anything else. So all this sort of stuff is starting to emerge now. The product on the third layer that enables that as a service fee to use, it won't necessarily be running Lightning, but it'll talk to Lightning, and then Lightning is rooted in Bitcoin. So that kind of thing will occur for spending apps, quote unquote, that enable you to buy your coffee. They will effectively be, you know, spare change kind of applications that fractionalize sats in order for you to do small denominator purchases. That'll be perfectly normal.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, okay, so you and I know about how much power there is in the hands of the people who control the money. And that trickles down into the entities out there that, number one, benefit by that, and number two, then have to enforce that. And even talking about, I mean, you know, Pomp, he recently got his channel on YouTube deleted, and then they apologized and brought it back. But others have had their channels deleted, like Ron Paul never got his back. So talking about these things that are inherently, the foundation of them is freedom, because if you can control the money, which is half of every transaction, you control the world.
Yes.
And when you start to have people that go around that and have access to be able to do things outside of that control, inherent in that is a level of freedom that is terrifying to those who currently have the control. And so I know there has been. I'm curious to hear the different ways that you've had to deal with censorship from big tech and companies trying to stop you from doing stuff. I don't know if you've had anything with Apple in the App Store, but I know there's stuff on Twitter. Tell me about the big hurdles, the big giants you've had to, like, you know, come up and fight against in this battle for freedom.
Definitely. I mean, so through 2020, my original Twitter account was like completely shadow banned. Like, I would literally write up an article, and I remember a couple of the ones that got mega censored were Why Liberty Matters, which was when all the stupid Black Lives Matter thing was going on around, and I was like, look, this is a Trojan horse for other, you know, leftist propaganda and stupidity and divisiveness. I was like, liberty matters first and foremost, and all this other bullshit, you know, is irrelevant. And I remember that article specifically because I posted this entire tweet thread, and the first tweet, and this had been happening for months, but it was kind of sporadic, and this one was wild. Like, the first tweet was just non-viewable. And I got a message from Giacomo Zucco, who's like a really well-known Bitcoiner, early OG guy, and he messaged me. He's like, because he was the one who noticed it a couple times, and he was like, "Man, they're censoring your fucking thread again. The first tweet is just not visible." I was like, "Fucking hell!" He's like, "Okay, let's do the tweet thread again. This time, place the article in the second tweet." I was like, "Okay," so I did that. I did a whole tweet thread again, placed the article in the second tweet. All of a sudden, the second tweet was the one that was invisible. Because I was like, what the fuck? And then we tried it a third time where we made the first tweet and the second tweet the article, and then both of them were invisible.
Wow.
You don't see the rest of the tweets. Ooh, like, man, this is out of fucking control. So that was happening to me all of 2020. Like, whether it was Trump tweets, whether it was you know, Bitcoin tweets, whatever. Like, I was just getting mega censored. And it was my account didn't get nuked until 2021, but that was like May of 2021. And it was just as my account started to like really take off. It was starting a J curve. Then it got nuked for something really stupid. I called someone on Twitter a skank. And what it was, I just said I wouldn't let that fiat skank in my citadel, as a joke, because someone was like, oh, would you let? I think it was actually Dua Lipa. So it was like a stupid thing, right? It was like, someone said, oh, would you let Dua Lipa into your future citadel? And I was like, I would let that fiat skank into my citadel. And I got completely banned, completely wiped, completely deleted account on the basis of inciting violence and hate speech. And I was like, you have got to be fucking kidding me. Like, first of all, like, I've said some way worse shit on Twitter, like,
right.
that, could really easily quantify as violence and hate speech. This was not fucking violence and hate speech. Like, skank isn't even that bad. And like, it was really funny, actually, because I emailed, the thought police overlords over at Twitter saying, the definition of skank is someone who trades their time for money. Fiat is money by decree. I said, by definition, she's someone who trades her time for fiat, and as a result would not be able to afford to live in a Bitcoin citadel. So I got full explained it, and they just sent me an email back saying, sorry, but violence and hate speech is against our code of conduct, or whatever the fuck it is. I was like, fucking hell. So I had to rebuild from scratch and all that sort of stuff. But basically, like, these entities, like, I was on a discussion with Mark Moss, actually, with JPCs and the guys on a Twitter Spaces the other week, and we were talking about freedom of speech and censorship, right? And I kind of asked the question, which I'll ask to you before I explain what my thinking on this is why do you think freedom of speech is important, or even a good thing? Like, in your mind, why do you think that?
I mean, there's probably multiple reasons. To me, I think one of the top reasons why freedom of speech is so important is, number one, so we can find where the boundaries actually are, because well, we know talking is very similar to thinking. I mean, we all know that like, when you have to write something, you realize very quickly where your gaps in your thought process are. And when you have to tell something or teach something to somebody, you realize even more so where your gaps are, and somebody can pick you to shreds. And so having the ability, no restraints on speech, on what can or cannot be said, means that there are no constraints on thinking. They're very, very similar. And if we can't think through things, we don't have the ability then to find where the real boundaries are. And I'm very thankful that, I was in high school and college when things were not, at 100% of life was not permanently encoded on the internet, because, with everybody getting canceled these days. But there are things that I look back on and be like, man, I was really pushing the boundaries here. And I might not have done that if I would have known that somebody could come at me for making a big mistake with something that I said. And I'm far better for it, because I can look back and I can have easily identifiable boundaries now about what reality is and what is right and wrong. And so that's my answer. Tell me what you think.
It's really spot on. So if I had to distill that, I would say that in a complex system, you require some sort of medium or mechanism for feedback, for positive and for negative feedback loops, or for what one would say is like for a growth function or a corrective function, right? And speech is that in a society. It's like, we speak and we discover things and we push, as you said, the boundaries in order to either find something worth continuing to pursue, so that's the growth function, or discovering error so that we can correct and not do that. That is how a society progresses and moves forward. And that is something that that's analogous to the idea of like the map trying its best to represent the territory. Okay, the territory of life is a bunch of humans living on a fucking pale blue dot, acting towards some sort of ends and using means along the way to satisfy, whatever ends we might have consciously or subconsciously, right? And to do that, we're looking for feedback. Was this a good idea? Like, should I step off the fucking cliff or not, like, and feedback tells us that, hey, that's not a good idea, you're going to kill yourself. So we adjust, we correct, we double down, we do that sort of stuff. And the only way to do that is to have some sort of signal to tell us to do that. And that's the role free speech plays in a society which attempts to map reality well. But in a society in which the model is reality, and where we try and fit reality into the model, and when reality doesn't fit into the model, we just ignore it. Like Keynesian economics is a perfect example of which CPI inflation is just one of those classic examples. It's like, okay, let's measure inflation, but let's take out food, let's take out energy, let's take out all of these inconvenient things, and let's just keep shit like Netflix and a TV in there, right? So that's inflation. Like, it's completely fucking mind-boggling. You're literally lying to yourself. You're flying an airplane, and you're like, let's just take the altimeter out because the altimeter is telling us that there's a mountain up ahead, but I don't want to believe that there's a mountain, so I'm just going to pretend like it's not there. Like that. So in that kind of a world where you are desperate to make sure that the model is reality, what you have to do by definition is you have to censor the feedback, because that's what speech is. Speech is telling you, hey, we're on the fucking wrong track, or we're doing the wrong thing. Like, or an analogy I used recently on a podcast was this idea of let's say you and a group of people are walking through a desert, and the leader is holding the map, and the map says that there is water and, like, luscious food and everything everywhere, and you guys all have a little bit of water with each of you, and the leader is looking at the map and pretends and believes that the map is reality, and everyone else is like, hey man, it's a fucking desert here, we shouldn't be drinking all of our water because we're going to starve, or sorry, we're going to die of thirst. And the leader is like, no, the map says there's water everywhere here, we're going to be okay. And you're like, no, but there's no fucking water, it's a desert. And so he says, look, you're going to scare everyone, shut the fuck up. So he kills you so that he can continue his fantasy. And that's kind of the world we're living in today. We're literally eroding everything around us. We're destroying everything around us. We're shutting down businesses. We're restricting speech. We're fucking playing, biological games with everyone, like all of this crazy insanity across the board. And we're pretending like it's not happening because our little models are supposedly more important than what the feedback of reality is. And that's a very dangerous place to be in, number one. And that is, I mean, for me, that's like, we won't wake up from that like fantasy until we're the person who is actually making that decision that the map is the real thing actually runs out of water and dies. But hopefully, the other people don't die alongside. And this is the importance of Bitcoin, is that some of us have chosen to like take what little water we have left and just go in a different direction, and go actually build a map that actually represents reality and not this fantasy.
Yeah. It's very similar to an idea that I talk about from the standpoint of risk a lot, that you can't eliminate risk, you can only transfer it. And if you have, let's say, a group of people standing next to a cliff, one person, let's say, gets too close and they fall off the edge, what will everybody else do? They're going to instantly back away, right? They're going to be like, hey, I'm not standing anywhere near that because I just saw somebody, it's possible to fall off. So the chance for individual failure makes the system much stronger as a whole. If you take a different approach, though, to the solution, and you give everybody a rope, and everybody has to hold on to a rope, suddenly people, they'll get close, they'll look over. If, let's say, one person slips, well, now everybody else is holding on the rope, so they pull them back. Now there is no risk of failure, because if I get too close to the edge, everybody else will pull me back, which means everybody gets too close. And now that risk wasn't eliminated by the rope, it's just transferred to the hole and everybody falls off. So by transferring risk from the individual to the system, you don't eliminate that risk, you just make the system much more fragile. And it's that idea of the feedback that you're talking about. If you try and force reality into your model and censor the feedback, you're taking the risk from not correcting when you have that negative feedback, and forcing it onto the system until the system collapses.
Yeah, totally. Dude, that is such a great analogy, and I think I'm going to steal it and use it elsewhere.
Take it, yeah.
Like, dude, it really is. It's this whole like elimination of the individual and elimination of the responsibility of the individual, particularly the responsibility over themselves, is the greatest cancer on the planet. Like it's really the only pandemic that exists, and it's existed from the beginning of time. It's this idea of, you know, you're not responsible for you, but you're somehow responsible for everyone and everything, which is too vague to actually nail down to something. So no one's actually responsible for anything. So we're all kind of somehow responsible for everyone, is exactly that rope analogy. Is like, we're all fucking falling off this cliff together, because we're all in this together. And the funny part is like the clowns that are printing the money. I mean, you know, arguably, some of them are going to fall with it because they're just too stupid and dumb. But, you know, a lot of them are just sitting there laughing at us. Or like, and what's unfortunate is that there's actually good people, like good, productive people that are entrepreneurial or that are intelligent, all that sort of stuff. And we're actually the strong ones holding everyone back, saying like, don't fucking jump, you know, like it's, you're going to die. There's a thing called gravity, and everyone's like, no, it's okay. You know, we never fell before. And they're all looking over the edge. And we're screaming at the top of our lungs, trying to hold everyone back. And then the clowns that are printing the money, they're like, no, jump. It's all right. Nothing's going to happen. Yeah.
I think some of the, like you talked about why the confusion is out there, where there's so many people just kind of blind to this and looking at reality in a backwards way. I think a lot of it comes down to scale. Like you talked about complex systems earlier. And like, for instance, I am a communist at home. Right? My wife and my kids and I, we share everything. We live like communists. We don't trade money with each other. I mean, I do a little bit with my kids to teach them about how commerce works, but it's really like we live like communists, right? But that wouldn't work if I included my neighbors in it, and it definitely wouldn't work if it was my entire neighborhood. And so things change as scale changes, and as scale increases. A lot of times things flip on their heads, and what is true of the whole is exactly the opposite of what is true at the individual level. And it's why you get places that you know, are let's say very small countries that look maybe from the outside a little bit more socialist, or have some of these systems that might work better, but it's on a smaller scale. It's not, you know, 330 million people or 1 billion people in India or China. And so I think scale is something that people really miss a lot of times.
Totally. I mean, that was in Skin in the Game, right? Taleb quotes that one, right? Yeah. So I mean, he's such a fucking disappointment over the last couple of years. But anyway, Jesus.
His books are great. His books are great.
I know. So whoever his ghostwriter was, the guy's a genius. Honestly, I'm sure they were ghostwritten, because you know, the real Taleb seems to be a fucking deranged lunatic. But yeah, like that scale thing is really, really important, because some things just don't scale up. And I mean, I mean, I can't really add anything to that heuristic, because it is fundamentally spot on. Is you know, you need, like, this is why, like, I always say, and maybe this will actually tie into what we want to talk about decentralization, right? Is that at a particular scale, like the idea of applying decentralization to everything just doesn't fucking work. Like it's got a very narrow use case. And what a lot of people think is they kind of think that decentralization is the end, you know, goal, or something that we need to be pursuing. Whereas decentralization is actually a means to an end, and that end is a high degree of censorship resistance. And censorship resistance that requires a high degree of cost. I mean, arguably there's a single use case, which is placing money, the tool or the mechanism via which we measure all human interaction, how we codify or encode time, energy, natural resources. Like, that thing should be maximally decentralized, or it should be maximally censorship resistant. And to do so should be maximally decentralized and meaningfully decentralized. So across multiple dimensions, whether it's, you know, validating, whether it's you know, a node operation, whether it's whatever, right? So that, like, that architecture, that infrastructure, that 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 incentive design fits very well for Bitcoin, but trying to take that recipe and applying it to a bunch of other things is complete mindlessness. And that's where I guess we can get into the meat of this conversation around like what people are thinking about with decentralized tech.
Right. Yeah, and that's exactly the main stuff that I really wanted to dig into today with you, because you know so much about it and have a very different view on it than a lot of people in the space do today. When we first met, we were talking about you know getting kicked off of Twitter and getting censored and all that. And my initial response to you is that there are some promising looking applications that are decentralized social media alternatives. And I kind of asked, why do you think they're not getting off the ground yet? And your response to me was, that's all bullshit. Those don't matter. They're useless and meaningless, and they don't get to the root of the issue. So before we get to the root of the issue, I'd like to hear both from a technological standpoint and from more of like a philosophical standpoint, why those don't really, why they're non-solutions.
Sure. So first of all, for something to be meaningfully decentralized, there needs to be incentive for people to operate the nodes themselves, because you know something that is decentralized means that it has multiple nodes, right? Mm-hmm. And you know, in a society, multiple nodes means like, I don't know, multiple cities or multiple locations or multiple humans or multiple cultures, right? So a node can be, you know, is a metaphysical description of a thing within a network, right? So if we think about these decentralized social media applications, like the idea there is that we're all running our own fucking servers that somehow store all the data for, you know, whatever. Now, what's the incentive? I mean, what, like a token that's going to, you know, run its own thing? Then the problem with that is that token fundamentally becomes money, because any token that has a monetary value attached to it is trying to function as some sort of money. It becomes a tradable good that is traded on these networks, etc., which means it's competing against Bitcoin. Now, what's a bigger problem to solve? The fact that money should not be controlled by anyone, or someone's version of a YouTube, right? Well, money trumps that fucking million times over, which means it's not going to compete with it, which means over time that token is going to lose fucking value. The incentive model will not sustain somebody, and particularly millions of people, for it to be meaningfully decentralized, for it to be meaningfully censorship resistant. It won't sustain itself enough so that it can remain that way. So what will happen is all of these networks that are supposedly decentralized, if you actually look under the hood, most of them are run by the initial foundation that launched the token, and maybe a couple other token people that you know, want to bootstrap the network, right? What you end up with is not only something that is not meaningfully decentralized enough to be censorship resistant, but you end up with something that is slower than a YouTube, or than a, you know, I don't know, whatever other, I mean, if there is even another streaming platform these days, there really isn't, you know, Vimeo, right? But you get a worse customer experience. It's slower. It doesn't work as well. It's not as functional, with none of the real benefit of censorship resistant that the decentralization element is supposed to be giving, right? Like Bitcoin is borderline censorship resistant, and it's got hundreds of thousands of fucking node operators. These things are like 5 or 10. Like it's not censorship resistant, but it's the furthest thing from it. So you end up getting the worst of both worlds. So from a technological perspective, it's a fucking moot point. Like it's not going to happen. There is no fundamental underlying incentive for you to be a miner, nor just a node operator or any of that sort of stuff. But in Bitcoin, there is. It's baked into it. Like you hold some fucking Bitcoin, and the more node operators there are, the miners have an explicit incentive, but even a node operator has an incentive, which is maybe not as money like, you know, the miners get the block reward. As a node operator, you get benefits of like privacy, of ownership, of, you know, sovereignty and all that sort of stuff, which, you know, are not as direct. They're kind of more indirect benefits. But I mean, you can run a Bitcoin node for $50.
Right.
You know, to run a node for something like this, which is a decentralized social media platform, you're going to need to spend thousands of dollars on server infrastructure and enough to like actually substantiate that. For what? Like you're not getting the payback for it. So it's uneconomically feasible, and as a result, it'll always trend towards centralization again, which is where, you know, things like Bitcoin Cash and all this sort of stuff that tried to place data ahead of censorship resistance, for example, they've all ended up on the same fucking path. Like it's they're all expensive versions of PayPal, or they're all substandard versions of YouTube, Twitter, or Facebook.
So I'd like to make sure that I understand with a recap and an analogy. So recap,
Sure.
you've got two things that operate as money, but they're solving different problems. Bitcoin solves the biggest, best problem, and some of these other ones are solving tiny problems when you consider the you know, relative to each other. Therefore, because they're competing, Bitcoin will beat them. Therefore, it's really not from that standpoint useful to try and perpetuate you know, a token as long as you can. And then the analogy that you know, from what I would understand from like an economic perspective, I hear about gold-backed cryptocurrencies a lot. And my typical response to that is, well, is the gold the money or is the cryptocurrency the money? Because if the gold is the money, why do you need the cryptocurrency layer on top of it? All you're doing is adding a public ledger to the ownership of something that's completely untraceable. You've got a rock in your hand. If the cryptocurrency is the money, well, why do you have the physical rock attached to it? Because now you have all of the problems of both. Like you have to physically transport the gold for the payment to actually happen, but you don't get you like you said, you get the biggest problems of both and no advantages. It's slower and, you know, and more expensive and all of that. Is that a similar analogy just applied to technology?
Yeah, it really is. It really is. And it's funny that you even mentioned this, because it's like in my early days of like sort of coming across Bitcoin and stuff like that, and I saw these original gold-backed tokens, and that was one of the things that actually started making me a Bitcoin maximalist. Was like I was looking at all this dumb shit, and I was like, what exactly what you just said then? I was like, why are people attaching a cryptographic token to a fucking piece of gold? Like it doesn't make any sense. Like you which one is the money?
Yeah.
What's the ledger? What are you fucking doing? And it just that was honestly part of like what led me down the Bitcoin rabbit hole and made me actually look at these things more objectively and with a lot more scrutiny. I was just like, no, this is a complete load of, you know, malarkey. It's like it's really, really stupid. And then all these guys that are launching their own tokens, I mean, there is nothing of value that has been built in the entire crypto space other than mechanisms for wild speculation. Like literally zero. Like even art is becoming a deranged form of low quality JPEG horseshit that people are passing off as, you know, the new wave of art, you know, in the form of NFTs. Literally none of these platforms, none of these things have done anything other than sell, you know, pie in the sky narratives in order to issue their own money, which is the greatest business of all. Like, I mean, dude, if I could issue my own money, and this is the thing, it's like an ethics thing. Like I probably, some days I wake up and, you know, like, you know, it's a hard day at like doing stuff with capital raising or something honest with Amber, right? And then I turn around and I say, fuck me, man, there's people out there who just literally raised $20 million overnight for a pie in the sky dumbass idea of a token, and they have no accountability, no nothing, no, like it's literally just they got money for free.
Yeah.
And for me, it's like, I mean, there's no better business model than just printing money. Like it's the ultimate business model,
Right.
in a fraudulent world.
Sure.
And that's what all these cryptos effectively are. They take the narrative of Bitcoin, they then sprinkle it with a few other things, and then they sell their own money to basically idiots who are jumping from the fry pan, which is fiat money today, into the fire, which is digital panopticon type, you know, money run by nerds who think that it's a good idea that we should scan our irises in order to, you know, be part of an equal financial system. Like the idiots who did you see that world?
The world
Did you see the
coin?
world coin? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, like they're either trolling or they're that far gone, right?
Yeah.
Like this is what I mean. It's like, you know, the road to hell is basically always paved with good intentions at this point, because, you know, these guys are like, yeah, we'll anyway, whatever. Like it's out of control.
Well, you mentioned NFTs, and that's something that has caught my attention recently and really made me think about things, because I still can't figure out. It still seems to me like it goes against the trend of history and how money and value and technology works. So all throughout history, when you have a new technology come into play, what it does is it brings abundance to scarcity. So when you have a new farming method, a food that used to be scarce is now more abundant. When fire, right? Nutrients are now more abundant where they used to be scarce. Using animals in farming, the Industrial Revolution, steam engines, everything. This is all bringing abundance to scarcity. And that's what technology does. And even recent examples of this are like in music. Right. So you used to have gatekeepers, and 1% of people who tried to make it in the music industry would finally make it, and they make all the money there is in music. And the record labels had their hands on that. And technology comes around, you get TikTok come in, and you have, you know, some kids who are talented. They put up a song on TikTok and they make, you know, #1, and they, you know, they get big from it. And so the gatekeepers fall down, and you have an abundance now where there used to be scarcity. No matter what your musical niches or talent is, or whatever genre you appreciate, it's there now. There's abundance, and because the cost of entry is so low, and for the ones where they would have been held out before, they're in now, and it's a beautiful thing. It seems to me like the NFT space specifically is trying to do this Frankenstein, where it's saying, hey, we're bringing abundance to scarcity, but we're artificially imposing, or maybe fraudulently imposing, a scarcity model on top of this, that we're saying it's going to get more expensive. We're going to say the value is going to go up. When in reality, when you think about what technology does to art, when you think about what technology does to everything, it makes it more abundant. That's cheaper. That's more wealth, not less wealth. And it seems like it's completely counter what history and technology actually do, which make me very cautious of it, to say the least.
NFTs are this generation's tulip bubble, honestly. They are the same. They're of the same ilk, just multiple orders of magnitude more stupid. So there's a really great Bitcoiner called Gigi, and he did a tweet the other day, which is spot on. NFTs are everything people don't understand about cryptography mixed with everything people don't understand about art. Like, that's literally what NFTs are, because nobody can tell you what they actually are. And the most sense that I've been able to make of it is that NFTs are this attempt to tie a digital signature to a digital piece of art and pass off the signature as the art or something, because it kind of reminds me almost of the gold and crypto problem, right? Like the gold-backed cryptocurrency problem. It's like, what is the valuable thing here? Is it the art, or is it the digital signature? Because if it's the digital signature, then what's happening is that people are just speculating on a digital signature with a flavor of artwork on it. And what's happening is real art is being deranged, because, I mean, look at all the so-called art that's coming out of NFT. It's like a version of a fucking Bored Ape or some retarded JPEG or something else. So it's not like actual passionate, beautiful art that's being created. It's just people tweaking some pixels on a thing and then calling it an NFT and selling it to the first idiot who buys it. And maybe the first idiot who buys it might sell it to one more person. But where this thing starts to kind of destroy itself is that, at least during the ICO craze, because the tokens were fungible, there was some liquidity and depth that allowed that thing to last. Whereas here, what we're doing is we're creating this horizontal, non-fungible marketplace where the ability to resell that art might only be 1 or 2 times, maybe 3 times, if there's 3 idiots that will rebuy the digital signature. But every single week, every single month, every single day, there's a new piece of so-called digital art coming out, which makes the market so illiquid, so horizontal, so broad, that something that was created 6 months ago is not going to be resold because people are already on to the next trend and the next fad and the next NFT and the next whatever. So basically, we're eroding art, we're conflating it with digital signatures, we're creating mini pump and dumps, and effectively tulips just in the digital realm. And we're throwing in, more, confusion around, NFTs can be used for ticketing systems and it's decentralized and it's, like all the buzzword salad that sort of goes into any of these so-called innovations that nobody actually knows what the fuck is going on. So what do? They have fear of loss. So they buy something and they're like, I'm an NFT holder now. And guess what? No one's ever going to buy that thing off you again. You just burnt a bunch of money for what's effectively a JPEG. And you've done nothing for society. You've solved no problems. You've done nothing for art. And we've just played this charade for no reason. And again, for me, this is like, I don't know if you've read Adam Ferguson's When Money Dies, which is the story of, it's a beautiful book, right? Beautiful, probably not the right word, but it
is great. Yeah.
It's an excellent book, but it's sad. And honestly, when I look around, I just get Weimar vibes from everything. And NFT is just the latest incarnation of Weimar vibes. It's a bunch of people who don't know why they're getting rich, who don't know what they're buying, who don't know what they're selling, who don't know what they're doing, who can't even explain to you in a single sentence what it is that is important or special about this. But they're going for it because YOLO and FOMO, basically. It's insane.
Well, and even even the ones that are attached to some sort of like real world utility, like, there's some CEOs or artists who sell an NFT and that whoever owns it gets access, it's granting access. And so ownership is something of real world tangible value. Even that then makes me ask the question, kind of like the gold backed cryptocurrency, like it's a technological application of something that makes it either less efficient or more expensive or worse in some way than if you would have just done that by itself. Like, you don't need an NFT to get a ticket to a football game, because you have QR codes, right? Introducing all these other layers make it worse.
Correct. And like, this is where the decentralization narrative also falls apart, is that they try and inject the decentralization narrative into NFTs as a justification for why we need to build NFTs on Ethereum, for example. It's like, no. Like, the idea of NFT has existed forever. It's a fucking ticket, right? Like, I just bought a ticket for the Jordan Peterson thing in Austin, and I'm going to go do that. And guess what? My ticket has a unique code on it, and it's got a QR code on it. And my ticket is hosted with Ticketmaster or AXS or whatever the platform is. That's a non-fungible token by definition. And the only thing is, it's being run on a central server, which, to be honest, is more reliable than running it on Ethereum, because on Ethereum, for me to transfer it to someone, I'm going to have to spend $100 in gas anyway. So it's just complete madness. But again, which is why I kind of come back to the only problem that cryptos have solved is like making it easier for people to gamble across multiple dimensions. Like, it's added zero value to society. There's no utility for humanity. There's no utility for society. There's none of that, whereas Bitcoin kind of it's completely separate and unrelated to the rest of these things, which is Bitcoin's trying to solve the grand problem of putting the money outside of all of our hands so that we're all playing the same game of Monopoly. And then we can actually have a functional world, because in that world, we are forced to, not by anybody, but we're forced by the physical laws of the universe. Like, in the same way as we're forced by, gravity when we jump to come back down, we're forced by, the speed of light, we're forced by time to do things, in a forward progression. Bitcoin forces us to cooperate instead of steal and create machinations or mechanisms for theft, because we can conflate the model with reality. Like, Bitcoin forces us all on the same standard. And that's a huge boon to society. And it's like, it's solving a great problem. Whereas crypto, to me, is just, intellectual fellatio designed for nerds and gamblers. Like, that's about it.
Well, and it's a lot. The big reason for that is because you have a technology that was designed to be sound money, and that's it's very simple, very elegant. That's what it's designed to do. And then you have you try and take that and you try and force that into another technology. It's not going to work as well if you try and put that into another application other than just being money. It's probably just going to make whatever you're trying to force it into worse.
Yeah, it's the classic take a tank and put it on a racetrack against the F1, right?
Yeah.
Great idea, bro. Like it's really dumb, you know. Or what I would actually like. I remember I was doing I gave a talk 3 or 4 years ago at this conference where they asked me to come and talk about blockchain, right? And I was like, "Are you sure?" And they're like, "Yeah." And I came and I kind of destroyed the idea of blockchain, and I compared a blockchain to Bitcoin as like a Tesla having a race with a potato. And I was like, that's about the, you know, the relevance of these things. It's like, it's just completely fucking useless. Like,
Yeah.
so, you know, the tank and the racetrack is kind of similar, but it's more like a tank and a fucking potato. Like, they're just like serve completely different purposes. And it's like, I don't know. I've got nothing against people running companies, but please don't pretend like you're not running a company. Please don't issue me your money. Please don't like sit there and pretend like, you know, you're something, you know, faster or better than Bitcoin, because you're not. You're just a company, and realistically all you're doing is you're issuing your own money, which makes you no different to the central bankers that we're all against in the first place anyway. So why don't you just go and build a useful business that leverages Bitcoin and helps the world progress, instead of wasting everyone's time, confusing everyone, and sucking basically the oxygen out of the room. I mean, maybe one could argue the one benefit of the shit coins is that they maybe, you know, in the government's frustration that they can't do anything to Bitcoin, maybe they'll point the gun at, you know, the shit coins, and they may in some, you know, cosmically justifiable way present, you know, cover fire for Bitcoin. And maybe that's the case. Yeah. But, you know, by and large, I don't see any other use for them.
I think it's interesting that it wasn't an altcoin, it wasn't a shit coin. It was a layer 2 solution on the back of Bitcoin that finally got Bitcoin adopted as a legal tender somewhere.
You mean Lightning?
Lightning in El Salvador. It wasn't.
Yeah.
It wasn't on the backs of an altcoin. It was on the backs of somebody developing a real world application that was on top of Bitcoin.
Yeah, totally. I mean, but here's the thing: like, what nation state is going to give up? Because giving up your like, Salvador calls itself a sovereign, but really it's a dollarized economy. So the real sovereign there is the US. Like, so if Salvador was to adopt Ethereum, basically the real sovereign would become Vitalik and friends. No fucking country is going to do that ever. You know, so but Bitcoin is neutral. Bitcoin is not like, there isn't someone you can point to. So it's like, that's basically akin to a sovereign bringing gold into their economy. And gold isn't a ruler. You know, it is a physical object that is inert, and you know that makes a lot of sense. So Bitcoin sits in that realm, but no country in their right mind is going to give up their sovereignty to a group of nerds that will then dictate monetary policy. No fucking way, man. You got to be a retard to do that.
So then, final question here. When we talk about solving the solutions, like especially like big tech censorship, what is it about a sound money system that gets us to a place where stuff like that doesn't happen anymore?
Yeah, so let's we spoke about free speech as a mechanism for correction or growth in a system, right? So if we think about if we think about this problem through that lens, we start to realize who the customer for the social media platforms really is. It's definitely not you and I. Right. The real customer is Wall Street, the advertisers, and upstream from them, the state apparatus, which basically dictates what the rules are, who can do what, and what mandates they need to follow. So really what we've got is we have an inverted, relationship between us as consumers, so-called consumers, and the service providers, who don't view us as consumers. They view us as users of some
Products.
sort, products basically, to sell to governments and advertisers and Wall Street in some way, shape, or form. So when you think of it that way, what you start to realize is that there is, like, censorship is actually a profitable business model in that lens. The economically viable action for a Twitter or Facebook or someone like that to take is to create some sort of safe space so that the advertisers can, shill whatever thing, whatever drug or whatever pharma thing or whatever. Like, I saw an ad the other day for new McDonald's stuff where, they're putting in bicycles on the tables so that when you're eating your Big Mac, you can like pedal. I was like, you gotta be fucking kidding me. The clown world is getting more clowny by the day, right? But that's the kind of like, hypnosis that is necessary in order to make these so-called users products of the system instead of the other way around. So this is all funded by the fact that the ultimate decision maker, the ultimate customer, the state, is the one that can basically fund it through three ways: fund it through taxation, fund it through inflation, or fund it through borrowing from the future, right? Like they're the three real pillars. And if you strip that capacity out upstream, and you can't fund, an entity like the state cannot fund itself through inflation, through taxation, or through borrowing from the future, what you end up doing is you change the relationship between, the state and the people from like a subject overlord into a customer service provider relationship. And then all of the products and services around that, they no longer have the incentive to make friends with this other service provider. In fact, they have the incentive to outcompete that service provider. And what they'll do is they'll start opening up the channels of communication because it's more economically feasible to do so. It is no longer economically feasible to cut out a large section of your users and to censor them in order for you to package up your service to this customer, which is known as the state. That when you remove that piece of the cancer out, then you get the real competitive forces of natural capitalism, where if you don't want to service me as a customer, someone else right next to you will. And that person can, because you can no longer get the advantage of being able to sell to the government while your competitor can't. And that's what's lacking at the moment, is if you want to go and compete with a Twitter or a Facebook or an Instagram, first of all, you have no chance because of how large they've become. They've become large thanks to the apparatus of Wall Street, who has become so large thanks to the printing press and the regulatory moat that's been built around Wall Street, which is now effectively an extension of the state. So all of these things have occurred as a function of the centralization and the issuance of money from one entity. So you strip that, all of a sudden, all of the things downstream start to become far more competitive. And then when you think about it logically, again, we spoke about systems thinking earlier, is the larger an entity becomes, the more prone it is to being attacked by smaller competitors. And we see this all throughout nature, all throughout everything, is like there is a natural size that starts to become a limit to which something can viably operate, economically speaking and biologically speaking. Like, we have distorted that today because the larger you are, the closer you are to the monetary spigot, the more you get the capacity to bail yourself out, to get loans, to get favorable regulations, to get all this sort of stuff. So we have these basically zombie behemoths that can unfairly compete against any upstart. And even with that disadvantage, upstarts still seem to come out of nowhere and outcompete them. That's how powerful fucking innovation is. But if you strip away that unfair advantage that you get thanks to the monetary fiat system, you will see a much broader competition. And in a much broader competition, you get a natural equalization of products and services. You get way more offerings, you get way more choices, you get way more options, and you get this kind of world in which if someone wants to take on the business model of censorship, they can by all means do that, but they will probably get out competed by the competitor that doesn't do the censorship, or that does a much smaller level of censorship. That, there might be one platform that says, okay, we just don't use the word fuck, that's it, but you can say anything else you want, whatever, like that might be their business model, etc. So that's how we fix this. And that to be honest, in some ways that is actually a decentralized solution to the problem, but it's not decentralized in the way that where these people are trying to sell it by creating their own currency or their own token. It's naturally decentralized in the capitalist sense of let the fucking market compete and decide. Don't remove the function of the market by creating a state that unfairly subsidizes and supports one group at the expense of all the others. And that's the problem that we've got to solve. And that's the problem that Bitcoin solves fundamentally. So
I'm going to try and distill that, and I might distill it too much. We've got the base layer, the foundation is money. In a fiat system that grants the state unlimited power and spending power, and that is then the way that rolls out is by protecting incumbents and flipping upside down the natural order of things to where you have basically state-sanctioned monopolies. And when you decentralize the appropriate layer, which is decentralizing the layer of money, which is the foundation, you get freedom on top of that, which allows competition, and that takes away the unlimited spending power of the state to support its incumbents and to support its government-sanctioned monopolies, to the point where the free market fixes itself, and anybody doing these horrible, disastrous things can't rely on that unlimited spending power. They have to adapt or die.
Totally. Like if I had to sum it up into one phrase, it would be Bitcoin makes free speech great again, or maybe more accurately, Bitcoin makes free speech profitable again. Because at the moment, free speech is not a profitable business model, because the state doesn't want it. That's the real customer. And you as a service provider are not going to make any money. You will get shut down, you'll get sanctioned, whatever will happen, because the state is your real customer. Whereas we invert that. If the market is your real customer, it makes sense to make free speech completely like part of your DNA, because then that's the profitable mechanism. That's the profit. That's the way to profit. And it's so important that we do that. Like if I had to finish, with one little last analogy here is the Monopoly analogy that we used at the beginning. So if we're playing Monopoly, and again, I'm, got my hand in the money, like, in the bank, in the till, the game's going to change. The dynamics of the game will change from people wanting to play an honest game to people trying to be friends with me, because I might give them a handout and not to somebody else. And that's exactly what's happening in the world today. It's like Google, Facebook, Twitter, and all these guys originally started off as these incredible disruptive businesses who got big enough that in order for them to survive and stay big, they had to become friends with the government and the state, because that's the one who became their real customer. And that therein lies the core of the entire fucking problem. And building some sort of substandard, not decentralized and not, better product is not the fucking solution. The solution is that we defund these clowns, and everyone becomes economically accountable, in which case products and services will spring up that become profitable because censorship is not part of their agenda.
Fix the money, fix the world.
Totally, man. Totally. Like you fix the money, you fix the individual, and then you fix the world. And that's literally the game set match of this whole thing.
Man. Well, I think that's a perfect place to stop. I could talk to you for hours about this, but I want this message to get out there. And I really appreciate the time. This was unbelievable, and we're going to rely on the fact that they're not going to listen to this and censor this. So we'll see.
They got us. They're on to us.
Right.
I could delete. Yeah. Well, let's hope this. Hopefully, heaps of people hear this, man. Honestly, because I just want people to get out of the hypnosis, man. If there's anything, it's like, if it's you know that like that drawing of the politician on
On the
the edge of the
board.
cliff.
Yeah.
Yeah, on the board, right? Yeah, that's literally what we need to do, man. Like if we all
Yeah.
just stop using their fucking money and just move on to a Bitcoin standard, these fuckers will become so bankrupt so quickly. Their heads will spin, our heads will spin, and you know the whole the power dynamic of the entire world shifts. And I mean, you know, kind of Bitcoin's doing that anyway. Like, you know, you and I are kind of like, you know, the person on the back of the pickup truck, you know, pushing like as if, you know, the pickup truck's like as if we're doing anything. So it's like, I mean, whatever little part we do, we do. But you know, Bitcoin's like a mind virus that is capturing everything
Yeah.
anyway. It's just, I just hope that we can at least bring a couple other good people along the ride with us, because they're the people we want to hold Bitcoin. Like we want as much Bitcoin in our hands and as little in the hands of the parasites as possible,
Mm.
because later on, like we're going to want to build our mini citadels and our own jurisdictions and our own territories that operate on a more natural rule of law as opposed to these stupid fucking decrees. And if, you know, if conversations like this do anything, it might, you know, wake up one or two people that want to be on that journey and have the courage to do so. So yeah, man.
Fantastic. Well, I've got your app, Amber, in the description below for anybody who wants to try it out that hasn't yet. I have your Twitter handle in the description below for as long as that survives. Anywhere else that you'd like people to come and find you?
Yeah, if people go to svetsky.medium.com, so all of my old writing is on there. Like all of my new stuff goes on Bitcoin Magazine, so that's where I've moved my blog generally. But like more of my historic stuff, and what I do is I republish, you know, 3 to 6 months later from Bitcoin Magazine over to my old blog. So, but most of my stuff is there. So if people want to sort of dig into some of these concepts, soon I'll be writing a piece on exactly what we discussed today called the New Leviathan, where it talks about this rise of the technocratic oligopolies and the fact that they've only been able to do so off the back of this you know, this monopoly on money, which is the state. So, you know, if people want to dig a little bit more into that sort of philosophy, that's where they'll find it. But yeah, otherwise the Amber app, and goes to the Svetsky on Twitter.
Perfect. I'll link that below as well. And thank you so much. Take care.
Legendary. Thank you, Joseph.